My boyfriend's best friend got drunk and asked me to pick her up. But at the private room's entrance, I saw her passionately kissing my boyfriend. Lying in his arms, she asked, "Do you really like Selena?" He laughed and replied, "How could I? I just wanted to get your attention." I turned around and texted my boyfriend to break up. Later, I vanished from their world. Yet they kept pestering me, begging for forgiveness. Vivian, my best friend, was drunk and called me to pick her up. Hearing the noisy background sounds and her slurred voice, I worried she might be in danger. I immediately threw on my clothes and rushed out, taking a taxi to the bar where she was. When I arrived at the private room's door, I noticed it was slightly ajar, leaving a narrow gap. Just as I was about to step inside, I suddenly spotted a man sitting in the center of the sofa, his features strikingly similar to my boyfriend's. And perched on his lap was a woman whose profile looked exactly like Vivian. But the lighting was dim, making it hard to see clearly. I quickly moved to the side and leaned slightly to peer through the crack at what was happening inside. The scene inside made my face burn and my heart race. A woman was sitting atop a man, the two completely lost in a passionate kiss, the intensity of the moment overwhelming. But I saw everything clearly now. Inside were my boyfriend Miles and my best friend Vivian. My heart skipped a beat before pounding violently, refusing to believe what my eyes were witnessing. Didn't they dislike each other? How could they be sneaking around behind my back? And Vivian, why had she asked me to come over now? Was this all staged for me to see? I took a step back and pulled out my phone to call Miles. I watched the people in the private room carefully, noticing how Miles visibly frowned when he saw the caller ID. Vivian reached up to wrap her arm around Miles' neck, pressing close enough to see the phone screen before asking with a laugh, "Selena's calling. Aren't you going to answer?" Miles motioned for Vivian to stay quiet before finally hitting the answer button and saying impatiently, "Yeah?" I steadied my trembling hand, forcing my voice to sound calm as I asked, "Miles, where are you?" Miles pinched Vivian's chin and kissed her before saying, "I'm at a business dinner. I'll be home late tonight." The sight stung my nose, and tears streamed down my face. Covering my mouth, I tried to stifle my sobs. After a moment, I managed to say, "Then drink less." Miles grunted in response and hung up. Tossing the phone aside, he immediately locked lips with Vivian, who could no longer hold back. My hand went limp, and the phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Staring blankly into space, my legs gave way. Clutching the corner of the wall, I slowly slid down to the ground. Until Vivian's voice came from inside the room again, "Miles, do you really like Selena?" Hearing Vivian's words, I pricked up my ears to listen for Miles' response. But his answer felt like it sent me straight to hell. His tone carried a hint of mockery. "How could I? I just wanted to get your attention." "So that's how it was?" Miles pursued me just to get Vivian's attention. Trembling, I picked up my phone and opened the chat with Miles. Tears blurred my vision, making it hard to see the keyboard clearly. But I could still vaguely make out the message Miles had sent me. "I love you so much, Selena." Now those words seemed bitterly ironic. Vivian is my childhood best friend. She's beautiful, lively, and outgoing. Since we were kids, she's always been much more likable than me. Starting from middle school, she's never lacked boys pursuing her. And I got plenty of benefits from it. For instance, they'd buy me snacks and bubble tea to find out Vivian's whereabouts, or treat me to meals so I'd put in a good word for them. But Vivian has high standards. Even with so many admirers, she never agreed to date any of them. Later, we made plans to attend the same university. That's where I met Miles, the student council president, during a student union event. Miles was the star of our university, good family background, handsome looks, and a gentle personality that made him especially popular among girls. I was one of them, but I only dared to keep this affection hidden in my heart. It wasn't until Miles organized the New Year's Eve party that things changed. The original female host fell ill, and after learning I had hosting experience, he asked me to co-host the event with him. With the party approaching, we rehearsed day and night, growing closer as friends in the process. During that time, I neglected Vivian, which upset her. She started disliking Miles, finding fault with him at every turn. Though Miles was gentle with everyone, he was oddly harsh toward Vivian. The two of them were like a bickering pair. Every time they met, they inevitably ended up arguing. During my junior year of college, I mustered the courage to confess my feelings to Miles while tipsy. I thought we wouldn't even remain friends, but unexpectedly, Miles agreed to be with me. When Vivian found out about my relationship with Miles, she was so angry she didn't speak to me for a long time. After I finally managed to appease her, she would constantly badmouth Miles to me every day, always hoping we'd break up. Miles also frequently told me to spend less time with Vivian. This strange dynamic between the three of us persisted until now. I always thought they were just like those stereotypical cases online where boyfriends and best friends naturally dislike each other. Never did I imagine they'd already been secretly involved behind my back. All these years, everything they did was just an act for my benefit. I stumbled home in a daze. Opening my phone, I saw Miles still hadn't replied to my messages. I lay on the couch crying for what felt like hours until exhaustion finally pulled me into sleep. Somewhere between dreams and wakefulness, I heard someone unlocking the door. The sudden brightness of the lights startled me awake. Blinking upward, I saw Miles changing his shoes in the entryway. He looked somewhat weary and frowned when he noticed me on the couch. "Why are you sleeping here?" I studied Miles carefully, suddenly struck by how unfamiliar this man seemed. He had never kissed me with such passionate initiative before, nor whispered flirtatious sweet nothings. In our relationship, I was always the one making moves. I'd assumed this was just Miles' personality, but tonight I learned the truth: he simply didn't love me. Miles grew visibly uncomfortable under my gaze, averting his eyes as he said awkwardly, "I saw your text. What are you making a fuss about this time?" "I've been busy with work lately and haven't had time for you. Things will be better once I'm done." Watching Miles still putting on this act, I suddenly found it laughable. His acting was truly terrible. I just hadn't noticed before, blinded by love. Staring straight into his eyes, I said, "Then let's get married." A flash of impatience crossed Miles' eyes at my words before he quickly soothed me. "Selena, didn't we agree to focus on our careers right now? We said we'd talk about marriage after the company stabilizes." I knew the only reason Miles hadn't broken up with me was my family background. His family's company had nearly gone bankrupt due to poor management. It was my father's investment that saved them. Otherwise, their company would have collapsed long ago. Later, when Miles started his business, he also used my father's resources. Now his company is thriving, and it's largely thanks to my father's help. With this kind of relationship, how could he possibly break up with me? I looked at Miles and said coldly, "Then let's break up." Miles still thought I was throwing a tantrum. He walked over, put his arm around me, and said, "Selena, we're not kids anymore. Can you stop being so childish?" Now, whenever Miles touches me, all I can think about is how intimate he was with Vivian, and it makes me sick to my stomach. I pushed his hand away and turned to go into my room. When I woke up the next day, Miles had already left for work. I got up, freshened up, and drove to Miles' company. The receptionist at the company saw me and quickly greeted me. "Miss Selena, are you here to see President Miles? He's in a meeting right now. Let me call Assistant Vivian to check." Hearing that name, I suddenly froze in my tracks. I stared intently at the receptionist and asked, "What did you just say? Vivian?" Perhaps my tone was too severe, because the receptionist got startled and stammered, "Why yes. It was actually Vivian." It had been so long since I last visited the company that I didn't even know when Vivian had started working as Miles' assistant. The receptionist, seeing my silence, asked again, "Miss Selena, should I call Vivian down for you?" I shook my head and walked straight in. Behind me, a few new receptionists were still discussing me. "Lily, so that's the boss's wife? She's not even that pretty. How did the boss fall for her?" "Don't talk nonsense, Miss Selena holds shares in this company. But I've noticed the boss and Vivian seem unusually close." "I told you to shut up. Don't let Miss Selena hear you." As if deaf to their incessant chatter behind me, I stepped into the elevator and walked straight into Miles's office. I sat in his chair, waiting for them to return from the meeting. Within 10 minutes, footsteps and voices, one male, one female, approached from outside. I recognized them as Miles and Vivian. Miles's voice was gentle. "Vivian, go check on Selena after work. I feel like something's off with her lately." Vivian snorted. "You still care about Selena? Didn't you say you were going to break up with her? When exactly?" Miles remained silent for a while before replying, "Later. The company still needs her father's help right now. You have to believe me, it's you I like. Selena isn't even my type." Then I heard the sound of kissing. My entire body trembled. My nose stung again, and I couldn't stop the tears from falling. This feeling of being betrayed by two people at once, it was absolutely awful. After a while, Vivian's coquettish voice came through. "Miles, will you marry me?" Unfortunately, just as Miles pushed open the door and was about to answer Vivian, his words caught in his throat when he saw me. I didn't hear Miles answer. "Miles, why aren't you saying anything?" Vivian said, walking in as if she owned the office, only to slam on the brakes when she saw me. Miles furrowed his brows again, his beautiful peach blossom eyes fixed intently on me as he asked with feigned composure, "Selena, what are you doing here?" Leaning back in the chair, I replied calmly, "I heard the new product needs a spokesperson. I came to take a look." Vivian clasped both hands behind her back, hanging her head and not daring to look at me. I knew this was Vivian's habit, she always did this when she was nervous. I held back my tears, trying to keep my tone normal as I looked at Vivian and asked, "Vivian, when did you start working at the company?" By then, Vivian had already prepared her response. She walked over to me with a smile. "Didn't I tell you I quit my job? I just happened to see Miles' company was hiring, so I took it as a temporary transition. Plus, I've been busy moving lately, so I didn't mention it to you." I looked at Vivian and Miles. They were still lying to me. I asked, "Is that so?" Miles answered first, "That's right." I nodded and said, "Oh." It seemed they were still planning to keep me in the dark, making a fool out of me. When I left the company, it was raining outside. I went to the front desk to borrow an umbrella from Lily, but she mysteriously pulled me aside. Lily gripped her phone tightly, looking somewhat nervous as she glanced around to make sure no one was nearby before asking, "Miss Selena, do you know about Vivian's post?" I should have known about Vivian's post. But as far as I knew, her posts hadn't been updated for a long time. Lily handed me her phone. I looked at the post interface on the screen, which belonged to a blogger named Vivian. She had over 1 million followers, and her profile indicated she was a couple blogger. I skimmed through her latest post. It was from yesterday. "Mr. M took me to see the northern lights in Iceland." Along with the caption, she had posted a 9-square grid of photos, all taken in Iceland. Checking the date, it suddenly hit me, just a week ago, I had planned a trip with Miles, but he had to go on a business trip. Later, when I reached out to Vivian, she also claimed she was busy visiting her hometown. Could it be that they both lied to me and actually went to Iceland together? I thanked Lily and asked her not to spread this matter. Returning to my car, I picked up my phone and searched for this blogger. Scrolling to the bottom, I saw the date was from 2 years ago, right after we graduated from university. My graduation trip with Mr. M. I said I loved watching the sea, so Mr. M brought me here. The picture showed Vivian's travel photos, many of which I had taken for her. Back when we graduated, graduation trips were all the rage. At that time, both Miles and Vivian had approached me separately, wanting me to go on graduation trips with them. I mediated between them for a long time before finally convincing them both to agree to a trip for the 3 of us. To ensure they'd get along harmoniously, I went all out with preparations, meticulously planning the itinerary for ages, eagerly looking forward to traveling with both my boyfriend and my best friend. But I never imagined they'd hook up that very day, deceiving me for a full 2 years. Mr. M rushed back from out of town in the middle of the night when he heard I was sick. I glanced at the timestamp, it was during the period when my mother had passed away. At that time, the company was in its early stages, and Miles was traveling everywhere just to secure project collaborations. When my mother passed away from cancer, Miles was on a business trip. I called him in tears, begging him to come back and be with me. But he said he simply couldn't leave and promised to fly back to comfort me as soon as the deal was finalized. By the time my mother was buried in the cemetery, he still hadn't returned. Yet the very next day after her death, when Vivian was hospitalized with appendicitis, he couldn't even wait for the next available flight. He had his driver take him back that same night. Turns out he could have come back after all, it's just that I wasn't worth returning for. My tears blurred my vision, making it hard to see the screen clearly. I closed my eyes, and tears rolled down my cheeks onto my phone. My heart ached so much. It felt like countless ants were gnawing at it. I wiped away my tears and kept scrolling through Vivian's post. 1-year anniversary with Mr. M. He took me to Disneyland and said I'll always be his little princess. That date was last year when I had planned a trip with Miles for so long. But just one day before departure, he told me he had to entertain an important client and might need to postpone our trip by a few days. So the important client was Vivian, wasn't it? He cancelled our trip to be with her instead. I had a fight with Mr. M today and was in a bad mood, but then he bought me 999 roses and a DR diamond ring, so I guess I'll forgive him. The accompanying photo showed their fingers intertwined, the diamond rings on their hands dazzlingly bright. I noticed the man had a mole on his index finger. Miles has the exact same mole on his hand. I couldn't bear to look any longer. Slamming my phone shut, I rested my head on the steering wheel and accidentally hit the horn, creating a deafening echo in the empty underground parking lot. The sound briefly cleared my dazed mind. But the moment I remembered Miles and Vivian had been betraying me for 2 whole years, my heart ached unbearably. A pain that pierced my heart and bones. I took a deep breath and drove out of the underground garage, heading home. Just as I was nearing home, a car suddenly darted out from nowhere. I swerved sharply to avoid it but ended up crashing straight into a tree. When I woke up, the hospital room was empty. My throat felt unbearably dry, and I instinctively reached out, groping for some water. But my hand lacked strength and couldn't hold the cup I'd just grabbed. It fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. The hospital room door was pushed open, and I saw a man wearing a hat and a face mask walk in. Seeing that I had woken up, he approached me and poured me a fresh glass of water. Before I could even ask, he explained, "Miss, you were in a car accident and crashed into a tree. I was the one who brought you to the hospital." I looked at him and asked, "Are you the car that suddenly swerved out?" He quickly waved his hands to distance himself. No, I'm just a concerned citizen. Your injuries aren't serious. I'll call the police now, and you can sort out the rest yourselves. I guess I'm pretty lucky. At least nothing serious happened." Seeing that I was fine, the man asked, "I'm Ethan. Do you want to call your family?" Who should I call? I didn't want to worry Dad, so that call was definitely out of the question. Miles? Vivian? Right now they were the last people I wanted to see. I shook my head. Ethan seemed to want to say something but held back. Without another word, he left after the police arrived. The police said the driver who suddenly swerved was drunk and driving recklessly. Fortunately, I managed to dodge in time. Although I crashed into a tree, the airbag protected my head, so nothing serious happened. After completing the police report, the officers left. My head was still groggy, and I fell asleep soon after lying on the hospital bed. When I woke up again, it was already dark outside. I picked up my phone and noticed that apart from a call from my dad, no one else had contacted me. I called my dad back but didn't mention the car accident, just told him I was out with Miles and wouldn't be visiting him for the next few days. After hanging up the phone, I stared at Miles' chat window and, as if possessed, gave him a call. The phone rang several times before it was answered, and Miles' impatient voice came through, "Hello." Lying on the bed, I gazed blankly at the ceiling and asked, "I was in a car accident. Can you come to the hospital to see me? I want to eat the porridge you make. There was a long silence on the other end, as if he was doing something, before he finally replied, okay, I'll be there soon. Hearing Miles agree, I felt nothing inside, just hung up the phone expressionlessly. About 15 minutes later, Miles called back. When I answered, I heard his slightly guilty voice, Selena, I'm sorry, but I have urgent work to deal with right now. I'll have my assistant bring you the porridge, and I'll come see you with more tomorrow morning, okay? I didn't argue or make a scene, just replied with a single okay before hanging up. It wasn't unexpected. Looking back on these years of our relationship, it seems he never truly cared about me once. Yet here I was, full of naive passion, believing I could be his exception. What wishful thinking, utter delusion. I covered my eyes as tears overflowed, soaking the pillow. At first I cried silently, but the injustice grew until I couldn't contain it. Gradually my sobs became audible, continuing until exhaustion finally made me drop my hands and turn sideways on the bed, staring wordlessly at the sky outside the window. My phone suddenly lit up, a notification from the forum. I tapped in and saw Vivian had updated her post. Just now. Mr. M lost the game to me, and he promised to buy me a bag every week for a month. Everyone, bear witness for me. The accompanying photo showed them at Vivian's place, both in pajamas curled up on the couch playing games, looking like any ordinary couple or married pair. Looking at the photo, my entire body trembled uncontrollably. Miles could ignore me even after I got into a car accident just to play games with Vivian. Can a person really be this heartless? I raised my hand and opened Miles' chat window. My hand shook so badly I could barely type, and my vision blurred as if covered by a veil, making the keyboard indistinct. I wiped away my tears, steadied my hands, and typed 5 words into the message box: let's break up. When Miles came to see me in the morning, he was carrying a thermos. Acting as if he hadn't seen my text message, he opened the insulated lunchbox and handed it to me, asking, "How did you end up like this? Nothing serious, right?" I didn't answer Miles' question and simply asked calmly, "You saw yesterday's message, didn't you?" Miles paused for a moment before saying, "Selena, don't say things in anger." I glanced down at the porridge Miles had handed me. It was seafood porridge. But I'm allergic to seafood. The fishy smell made me nauseous. I set the bowl aside and looked at Miles, saying, "Miles, you forgot I'm allergic to seafood." A flicker of panic crossed Miles' face, but it vanished just as quickly. He sealed the thermos again and replied without a trace of guilt, "I forgot. I'll have my assistant send you another meal." Leaning back against the bed, I closed my eyes for a moment before asking, "Did you really forget, or was this seafood congee meant for someone else, and I just got it by chance?" Vivian loves seafood more than anything. Miles frowned and said, "Selena, don't be unreasonable." I flung the thermos to the ground and raised my voice at Miles, "Tell me, am I being unreasonable, or have you and Vivian been playing me for a fool?" Miles looked startled that I already knew, avoiding my gaze guiltily without speaking. "I don't know how we ended up like this. When we first got together, I was all he could see. He would hold my hand across campus when people mocked me for being unworthy of him, never shying away from judgmental stares or malicious gossip. He would immediately confront our professors whenever I faced unfair treatment, fighting until he reclaimed the awards that rightfully belonged to me. He would prepare little surprises for me every week, never forget any holiday, and be my support when I was exhausted. We used to be so good together. How did we end up like this? After a long pause, Miles finally spoke, "I just think Vivian is interesting. She's always carefree, like a child, she doesn't restrict me, control me, or make me feel pressured." Hearing Miles' words, I suddenly felt like the person before me was a stranger. Back then, it was him who told me he wasn't afraid of pressure or hardship, that he only wanted to succeed, and begged me to help him. So I worked hard to transform myself into a businessperson, suppressing my childish temper, all just to provide him with more resources and connections. But now he tells me he likes carefree little girls like Vivian. Miles, seeing my silence, looked at me with pleading eyes and said, "Selena, it's just fun with her. I can't lose you. I suddenly laughed at him and spoke mockingly. Is it really me you can't lose, or is it my family's resources and connections? Miles was exposed by my words and remained silent for a long while. Just then, the door to my hospital room was pushed open, and Ethan, the one who had brought me to the hospital yesterday, walked in carrying a lunchbox. Ethan looked at Miles and said somewhat awkwardly, "Your family is here? I was just about to bring you some food." Miles asked with an air of authority, "Who are you?" Ethan ignored Miles, and so did I. Miles was left hanging, his face darkening with displeasure. I glanced at the lunchbox in Ethan's hand. Perfect timing, I'm hungry. What did you bring me? Ethan gave Miles a quick once-over, then glanced at the spilled lunchbox on the floor, piecing together what must have happened. He handed the lunchbox to me and said, "Just some home-cooked dishes I made. Give them a try." I opened the lunchbox and saw the simple home-cooked dishes inside, which looked quite appetizing. Just as I was hungry, I picked up the spoon and began eating heartily. After finishing the meal, I looked up at Miles, who had been staring at us the whole time, and issued my dismissal. "I've made myself perfectly clear to you. You can leave now." Miles didn't leave immediately. Instead, he looked at me and said, "Selena, I can end things with Vivian." Without even glancing at him, I immediately crushed his hopes. "I'll have my father withdraw his investment. As for whether the company can survive afterward, that'll depend on your own abilities." Miles slunk away in disgrace. Ethan gave me a thumbs up and said with conviction, "That's exactly how you should deal with a cheating freeloader." I responded politely, "Mr. Ethan, your cooking is delicious. Thank you for taking care of me these past 2 days. I'll treat you to a meal after I'm discharged." My words carried obvious courtesy while simultaneously issuing a dismissal. But Ethan acted as if he hadn't caught the hint, cheerfully insisting it was no trouble at all. Ethan was the type who easily made himself at home, and we actually shared common topics of conversation. Once he started talking, he couldn't seem to stop. It wasn't until he finally had to leave the hospital for an errand that I got some real peace and quiet. My injuries weren't serious, and I was discharged in less than a week. The first thing I did after being discharged from the hospital was to hire a moving truck to take all my belongings from the house I shared with Miles back to my own home, then send all of Miles' things to his company. The second thing I did was have my father withdraw his investment from Miles' company. This move immediately caused quite a stir, keeping Miles very busy. About half a month later, as Ethan and I were walking home after dinner, we unexpectedly ran into Miles at my doorstep. He looked rather disheveled, nothing like the confident man I'd seen just over 2 weeks ago. But he betrayed me. He should have known what consequences to expect. His eyes reddened the moment he saw me, and he said in a trembling voice, "Selena, I know I was wrong. I've already broken up with Vivian. Will you forgive me?" I looked at Miles and found his words particularly laughable at this moment. Without mercy, I exposed his true intentions and said bluntly, "Isn't it a bit too late to say these things now that your company is failing?" Miles wasn't exactly a savvy businessman, nor was he skilled at negotiations. Without the resources and connections my family had provided him, his company was struggling to stay afloat. Him coming to reconcile with me now was nothing more than an attempt to regain the resources my family could offer. Ethan stood in front of me, his usually smiling face now dark with anger as he glared at Miles and snapped, "Miles, what kind of man are you? A cheating freeloader has no right to put on this act of being some devoted lover. It's disgusting." In the half-month I'd known Ethan, I'd never seen him speak like this. Miles, stung by the remark, flushed red and glared furiously at Ethan. "What's your relationship with Selena? Who gave you the right to interfere in our business?" As I looked at Miles, I realized for the first time that the man I'd loved for so long wasn't worth my sincerity at all. I pushed Ethan aside and stood expressionlessly in front of Miles, saying, "Miles, how many times do I have to say it? There's nothing between us anymore, and my family won't invest in you again." Miles seemed to realize I wasn't just being temperamental this time, it was truly over between us. He stood there dumbfounded, speechless. I grabbed Ethan's hand and was about to leave. but Miles snapped out of it, rushing in front of us to block our path. He grabbed my hand and pleaded pitifully, "Selena, for the sake of how long we've known each other, can't you help me just this once? Help the company get through this crisis." I yanked my hand away from Miles and wiped it with a tissue. Then, staring coldly at his face, I spat out 3 words, "Not a chance." I called security and had Miles kicked out. This is a gated community. If the security team hadn't known Miles was my boyfriend, they wouldn't have let him in at all. Watching Miles being escorted out by security, Ethan turned to me and said, "You can use me as an excuse from now on." For a moment, I didn't understand what Ethan was referring to and instinctively asked, "What do you mean?" Ethan looked at me with unusual seriousness and explained, "If Miles comes looking for me again, you can tell him I'm pursuing you, that you're considering me, or we could pretend to be a couple." I looked at Ethan's somewhat serious face and suddenly found him quite adorable. Ethan seemed uncomfortable under my gaze, coughing and averting his eyes before indignantly defending me. "Anyway, that scumbag Miles, you must never forgive him." I promised him, I won't. Only after hearing my agreement did Ethan exhale, as if a weight had been lifted from his heart. Vivian came to see me. When she arrived, she was carrying the same bag as mine, the one Miles had given me. She strutted like a proud peacock, placing her bag in the most conspicuous spot as if flaunting her status in Miles' heart. Vivian took a sip of coffee, gave me a once-over, and sneered, "Selena, tell me, apart from your family background, what makes you worthy of being with Miles for so long? You should be grateful." She'd finally dropped the act. Miles' betrayal hurt, but seeing my friendship with Vivian turn out like this stabbed deeper. Back when those school kids bullied me, all our classmates just stood and watched. Only Vivian stepped forward, she shielded me and fought back against those who'd tormented me. After Vivian retaliated, she reached out her hand to me, pulling me up from where I'd been huddled in the corner. She patted her chest boldly and declared, "From now on, I'm your friend. If anyone dares to bully you, I'll fight back for you." Looking at Vivian, who was slightly taller than me, I experienced the warmth of friendship for the first time. After that, our relationship remained strong, with hardly any arguments between us. I never once imagined Vivian would betray me. Raising my eyes to meet hers, I didn't ask why, I simply said calmly, "There's nothing left for us to say now." Seeing my composure, Vivian seemed frustrated, as if her punch had landed on cotton. She shouted angrily, "Selena, if you're going to leave Miles, then make it clean. Do you know he still calls out your name when he's with me?" I replied to her, "I don't know, and I don't want to know." Vivian was left hanging, glaring at me with a dark expression. I took a sip of coffee and looked at Vivian, asking, "I just want to know, did you deliberately pretend to be drunk and ask me to pick you up because you wanted things to come to this point?" Vivian nodded without hesitation. "I've long been tired of putting on an act with you every day. I don't want to be the hidden mistress anymore, I deserve to stand by Miles openly as his rightful girlfriend." I nodded, lifted my coffee cup to clink against hers, and wished her, "May you get what you wish for." With that, I grabbed my bag and left. Stepping out of the coffee shop, I tossed the bag in my hand straight into the trash bin. I hadn't walked more than 2 steps when I bumped into Miles hurrying toward me. Seeing me alone, he let out a sigh of relief and asked anxiously, "Vivian didn't give you any trouble, did she?" I shot him a glance and snapped, "You'd better keep your girlfriend in check." Miles quickly explained, "Vivian isn't my girlfriend. There's nothing between us anymore." I didn't want to know about Miles and Vivian's affairs, nor did I respond to him, walking straight past him without stopping. But Miles quickened his pace and grabbed my arm. After staring at my face for several seconds, he hesitated before finally speaking, "Selena, if I end things with Vivian, can we go back to how we were before?" I shook off Miles' hand. "Miles, wasn't I clear enough? I don't like you anymore." Miles immediately retorted, "You're lying. We've been together for so long, how could you just stop liking me? Don't say things you don't mean, okay?" I rolled my eyes at Miles. I really wanted to know where his inexplicable confidence came from. What made him think I would keep liking him? Seeing I was about to leave, Miles took another step to block my path, Selena, I know I was wrong. I've thought a lot these days and realized I can't live without you. Vivian and I are really over, let's start again. His words were cut short when someone suddenly punched him, knocking him to the ground. I looked at the person who hit Miles, it was Ethan. While talking with Vivian earlier, I had made plans with Ethan to grab dinner later. He happened to arrive right at that moment. Miles scrambled to his feet, glaring at Ethan and shouting, "It's you again. What exactly is your relationship with Selena?" I took Ethan's hand and said to Miles, "What business is it of yours what our relationship is?" Miles' eyes widened in disbelief when he saw us holding hands. Ignoring his stare, I walked away hand in hand with Ethan. After we left and arrived at a restaurant, Ethan excused himself to the restroom. When he returned, he was holding a bouquet of flowers. Placing them in my arms, he smiled and asked, "Selena, I'm also quite curious about what our relationship is." I sniffed the flowers, they smelled wonderful. Miles used to give me flowers too, back when his feelings were genuine. But gradually, it became a mechanical routine, with him having the florist deliver them to me at the same time every week. I looked up at Ethan, his eyes filled with nothing but me. Smiling, I said, "Ethan, let's be together." Half a year passed in the blink of an eye, and Ethan insisted on meeting my father at my home. At first, my father thought our relationship was still too unstable and that meeting the parents was too soon. But the moment he saw Ethan's picture, he changed his mind immediately. Back then, I thought it was because Dad found Ethan handsome. But I never expected that as soon as Ethan stepped through the door, my dad pushed me aside, grabbed Ethan's hand, and said with a smile, "I wasn't mistaken, you're Ethan, right? When did you come back? Why didn't you tell Uncle?" Huh? Hearing my dad's words, I froze for a moment, blinking my eyes as I asked, "Dad, what are you talking about?" Dad patted me on the shoulder. "This is Ethan, don't you recognize him? When you were little, you used to pester him all the time, saying you wanted to marry him." Rubbing my sore shoulder, I racked my brain before finally remembering something. Staring at Ethan, I exclaimed, "You're that big brother from when I was little." Ethan shrugged helplessly, "You just recognized me? That hurts my feelings. When I was little, there was a neighbor's older brother who played with me every day. But right before elementary school started, his whole family moved abroad and never came back. I was too young back then, all I remembered was having such an older brother, but I'd forgotten both his name and face. I pretended to be angry and huffed, "You recognized me long ago, didn't you? Was it fun messing with me?" Ethan came over to coax me, "I only recognized you after learning your name. Don't be mad, I shouldn't have kept it from you." My dad didn't care whether I was angry or not, pulling Ethan aside to catch up. After dinner, Dad asked me to walk Ethan out. Outside, fireworks were bursting and children's laughter filled the air. Hand in hand, Ethan and I strolled along, chatting idly. When we reached Central Park, Ethan suddenly stopped. The moment he paused, lights illuminated beneath our feet. Ethan knelt on the ground and pulled out a diamond ring from his pocket. "Selena, I'm so grateful we met again. Will you marry me?" After being with Ethan, I realized that loving and being loved are two different things. Ethan loves me, so everything he does for me surpasses what Miles ever did. He never calls me unreasonable when I'm angry, never says I'm crazy when I want to go out for a midnight meal, and most importantly, he would never betray me. So I reached out my hand and nodded firmly in agreement. "I do." Miles' company completely collapsed. To get revenge on him, Vivian took the company's confidential files and defected to a rival firm. This became the final straw that broke the company's back, and it went bankrupt soon after. When I saw Miles again, he had even grown quite a few white hairs, his beard was unkempt, and his clothes looked worn and dirty, as if he'd been wearing them for a long time. When he saw me, tears streamed down his face. His whole body slumped lifelessly as he asked, "Selena, did I make a terrible mistake?" I didn't answer his question. Instead, I simply showed him my ring and said calmly, "Miles, I'm getting married. Don't bother me anymore." Hearing my words, Miles suddenly raised his head. When he saw the ring on my finger, his whole body began trembling uncontrollably, his voice hoarse as he begged me. Selena, I truly know I was wrong. It was Vivian who seduced me first. Now I've come to realize that the one I love is still you. That's just the kind of person Miles is, always shifting blame onto others when he makes mistakes. I have to admit, I must have been blind before to have fallen for someone like him. Seeing my silence, Miles thought there might still be hope. He hurriedly pleaded, Selena, please forgive me. I swear I'll never do this kind of thing again. I'm begging you. I looked at Miles, my voice completely emotionless as if speaking to a stranger, and said, the way you're acting now only makes me feel utterly disgusted. Miles seemed taken aback by my words, momentarily stunned. Miles, you say you love me, but where were you when I got into that car accident? You were curled up on the couch playing games with Vivian, not even a word of concern. The next day you made her favorite seafood congee, forgetting I'm allergic to seafood. I know more than just that. I know you were with Vivian when my mother passed away, during our anniversary, and even on our graduation trip. You say you love me, don't you find that disgusting yourself? Miles lost all his strength the moment he heard my words. I wanted to leave, but Miles reached out and grabbed me. He asked, is there really no chance for us anymore? I frowned. Let go of my hand. Miles persisted, Selena, I still love you, I only love you. I know I was wrong before, and now I realize my mistakes. Can't you just forgive me this once? I shook off Miles' hand, it's impossible, Miles. I don't love you anymore. There's really no chance between us. With that, I strode away without looking back at Miles. 2 years later, Ethan and I welcomed our child, an adorable little girl. Ethan said her eyes and brows looked just like mine. At our daughter's first birthday celebration, I spotted Miles. He stood outside the hotel, silently watching me through the window with a desolate gaze. If you looked closely, you could see sunlight glinting off the tears on his face. I ignored him and focused on greeting guests. Worried I might be tired, Ethan came over, took my hand and asked, are you tired? Do you want to go upstairs and rest? I can handle things here. I leaned into his embrace, no need, just hold me. Ethan chuckled. We stayed like that for quite a while, until Dad asked Ethan to check on our daughter, and only then did I let him go. It wasn't until I went upstairs that I noticed no one was by the window anymore. I didn't know when Miles had left, but that didn't concern me anymore. Because I'm truly happy now.